Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Global Mobility Series, where we debunk all your biggest and solve, I should add, your biggest headaches around recruitment, compliance, visas, sponsorship, and everything else that makes up mobility. Today, I'm joined by Ali, who is who basically runs Job Empire in the UK. So Ali, maybe for the viewers, give a bit about your background, your story, because it's a really interesting story. You're going for global domination here, aren't we? Starting from Canada. So yeah,
Sure. Yeah, so I'm Ali, Director of Job Empire UK. We were in Canada. That's where we started up in Brampton, Mississauga area. Not sure anyone's been to Canada, but they'll know, Brampton, Mississauga, just next to Toronto. Yeah, we specialize in warehousing, logistics, anything, in between. Nothing too special. We're just a startup in the UK.
Ali is one of the most efficient recruiters I know. So yeah, if you need this is a little plug for you here, Ali. If you need any recruitment services within the UK, international or abroad, he is your man. But just to give the viewers, before we dive into the questions, an overview of the series, I will be asking Ali here a series of questions. Feel free to send me your questions afterwards, and I can ask our next guest. But yeah, we'll tackle them one by one. So Ali, are you ready to rock and roll?
I am indeed.
Cool. So problem one is finding the right talent. So my question to you would be like, where do you start in finding and attracting kind of international talent? Because I know a lot of these brands lean on like skilled worker visas and like broad applications. So maybe you can just kind of unpack in the simplest way possible, top level, what that process kind of looks like in the beginning.
Sure. So in my industry, we deal with manufacturing and logistics. Now, you got to keep in mind that with manufacturing logistics, there's not many fancy certifications or like licensing or anything you need. Majority of our, volume goes into warehousing, or packing companies, which is just following a set of instructions. So for us, if there's a shortage and we want to, import candidates, we just look for English proficiency, which is pretty easy given how English is a pretty global, language, and it's pretty much taught everywhere. So we don't have any issues with that.
Cool. And like, what's typically the process when you start working with these companies? Do they give you what would you need as a recruiter? So say on the other hand, there's someone is looking for a position to be filled.
Yeah.
What do you need for them to then go start looking for this international work talent?
I'm sorry, I was looking at myself.
No.
Can you repeat?
That's no worries. So like just to kind of talk about like what do you need? So say like a manufacturing company needs to recruit some people from overseas,
Yeah.
that's typically a plug for them. They've got a good system set up.
Yeah.
What do you need from them? Do they need to just write out a job spec? Because obviously when it comes to like talent, they need to with the visa process in particular, there's like certifications, requirements that need to be met.
Sure.
Just like at the first step, what do they need to get going?
The first thing they need is resolve. If you want to move countries, it's a huge thing. I've moved to 4 countries, and probably not the smartest thing to do because you got to restart every single time. But yeah, it's absolutely difficult. Some people, once they get married, they move out, they move somewhere else, and everyone can relate. It's extremely difficult. So they need resolve. In terms of technicalities and stuff, we outsource it, and we plan to in the UK at least, to outsource it to Passportia, which is our partner for sponsorships, visas, immigration, etc., etc. So perhaps that might be better pitched towards one of them.
Mm-hmm.
But all we're looking for is just a willingness to come to the UK. We're giving them a job. If they need, we can lodge them somewhere. But obviously, it depends on if it's a smart corporate decision to make, if it's commercially effective.
Mm-hmm.
But we can package something for them if it's in the benefit of Job Empire.
Great. So that's something to consider as well. And from a company hiring, it's like you've got to think about these things and maybe work with a recruitment company such as Job Empire that has those options to help house them or lodge them, to use your words, as well.
Yeah.
Problem 2 was balancing quality versus quantity. So this is more of a you question.
Yes.
And as opposed to them, but I'm sure you're inundated with like applications of people that do want to move to the UK. How do you kind of filter those applications? Because I'm sure you have a much better way of doing it than the stories you hear in investment banking, where it's like, hey, we've got 10,000 CVs here. We're going to put half of them in the bin and just go through half of them. Like, what's your process to find your clients the best talent?
For the record, I think those stories with investment banking is, do you know what? I think it's a stunt. It's a marketing thing, isn't it? Like we're so prestige. That's what I think. I also think that no organization or corporation is as professional as it seems, but that's a whole separate thing. In terms of, we heavily rely on AI and technology. When it comes, it's like you could walk to McDonald's or you could drive there. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It makes things so much quicker, so much quicker. If you want to filter through something, like I could search a word, for example. Let's say, well, I can't search like height and gender. That's like a whole DEI regulations and stuff like that. But if I want to search welding, a bunch of welders come up. If I want to search up 10 years of experience, that'll come up. That's for at least in the UK. Or we do the same thing internationally. Now, sometimes you need specific licenses. In Canada, you need like a forklift license. If there's kind of ambiguity.
I can't
There's
say that word too.
I can't have any issues with that. But so if we want to filter using tech, that's what we do. It's the same for external candidates, aka outside the UK, and it's the same for internal.
Okay, awesome. And I think more recruitment companies are starting to lean on tech, so
Mm.
it's good that you're kind of keeping up, well, ahead of the curve, because I actually think a lot of the recruitment companies are behind on that. Problem 3 is adhering, and you kind of touched upon it there, to like legal and ethical standards during the recruitment process. So I know Job Empire is super focused. When I asked you about this offline, like what is the most important thing for you as a recruitment company? And it's compliance, right? So how do you typically manage this? How do you stay compliant? Also for maybe something that's not to do with you, but like what advice would you give to like in-house admins that are doing it themselves? How can they keep up with like all the compliance issues and things?
I think compliance is it's one of those things. It's one of those things. Sorry, it's one of those things that it's so like, for example, in the UK, they just announced that the national minimum wage is going up. Right. They also announced some changes in the budget. They announced like a bunch of money they're putting somewhere else. Some changes that came to social care workers, etc., etc. Now, all these things that the government do, and it depends on which sector of recruitment you're in. Social care doesn't really affect us too much, but manufacturing does, warehousing does, logistics does, drivers, anything like that, right? Supply chain issues. They also announced, okay, who cares what they announced? The point is that the rate at which they announce is like extremely fast, right? So you got to be super up to date in what you're doing. You can find some kind of organizations which give you like kind of a condensed version of what's in the news. Essentially, recruitment is a massive industry in the UK, so there's a lot of business to business solutions on that. But the advice we give is to just stay up to date. You'll have 6 different news outlets available. You'll have, and we also ask questions as well. We're part of organizations like the REC. They're fantastic people. They speak with government ministers. They advise them. They get quoted in them. So they're pretty heard. We literally went to their meeting yesterday where they gave us a bunch of compliance changes and how that's going to affect us, etc., etc. Now, to answer the other part of your question to do with ethics and equality, we were discussing this yesterday. You got to be really, really careful because, for example, you can't put a CV into ChatGPT because that's a breach of data protection acts, right? You also need to be careful when you use AI, when you scan through different software, because they say machines can think for itself and just develop itself. You got to be careful if it kind of has a pattern recognition, because that might go into indirect bias, or if it's a human, it could be direct bias. It's extremely difficult. One of the things that we do is that we kind of black out name, gender, whatever it is, and we have like a video interview, and then whatever answers that they give is a transcript, and then one of the human processes, they look at that transcript, and they decide if that candidate is suitable or not. That's kind of a way we try and minimize bias and ethics that come into that equation.
That's really a great point about ChatGPT, because honestly, I try and automate everything, put it through there, because it's fantastic tech. But I guess with some industries, it's more difficult than others. Problem 4 is managing candidates' expectations during the application process. So you've got, let's give you a scenario. Say you've narrowed it down to the top 4 or 5, maybe 10 candidates for a manufacturing role. What sort of contact should, and again, if it would be more helpful if you thought about this from an in-house perspective too. So imagine you're working as a recruiter in-house. Tackle this question from 2 angles. What do you do to what are your best practices for like keeping them excited? Obviously, just spitballing here, you probably don't want that process to be too long, do you? Because they might find other roles. But like, what timelines do you adhere to with that expectation process, and like, how do you kind of keep them engaged and contacted so that they don't slip up and they don't lose them to the competition?
Okay, so I can tell you a story on this actually. There's a company, I don't know if I can say their name. It's
It's
quite
fine.
a big company, Randstad, right?
Hmm.
One of good company, massive global. They have a contract with BA, British Airways. Mate, that recruitment process is horrible. When I tell it takes years, and I'm not joking, years. 1 year for my friend, she applied for this role, and it took them 1.5 year to get through. 1.5 year. But these companies, they have exclusivity agreements, these clauses in contracts, like you can't use anyone but us, etc., etc. So they can take their time. When it comes to candidate expectations, though, I think honesty literally sounds like a very, like, just what do you mean honest? I'm telling you right now, honesty goes a long way. When you're at the airport, right, and your flight's delayed, and you're like, okay, if they hide it and you don't know how long you're waiting there for, you get more kind of pissed off. If you're like, all right, you know what, the flight's 2 hours delayed, but I know it's because of engineering work, I'm going to get some coffee this time. You just want some clarity on what's going on. You don't want to be in a kind of limbo situation. It's just awkward and, it's just annoying, to put it bluntly. So I think honesty and, if, for example, the employer has an issue with this candidate, just saying, hey, listen, this is what we came back with. Could you maybe fix it? We can try to get you another shot at it, etc., etc.
Interesting. So, okay, just constant contact, every communication honest is typically enough and I've realized that in most things. It's just like, if you hit expectations, and the example that I use is McDonald's from a marketing standpoint, right? They don't promise you a Michelin star meal when you go in there, right?
Yeah.
But that's not what drags you there. What drags you there is, hey, they've promised you this cheeseburger, or
Yeah.
triple cheese in my situation, and
Calories.
they hit that expectation every time. And just the honesty of knowing that what they say and they deliver is consistent and to the point is typically enough. So it's nice to know that it's the same for recruitment as well.
It is 100%, especially so one of the things we do as well, we don't just supply employees, we also advise, for example, policy changes. So there's something called the IR35, which came into place. Now, a lot of a lot of companies didn't believe other companies. I've got a friend in recruitment, I say, so this is why I'm telling you this story. And he said that, look, this new legislation came through, IR35, and they're like, nah, no, what are you talking about? Nah, what are you talking about? It's something to do with umbrella companies, etc., etc. But that got people in a lot of trouble. The companies and the agencies. So it's in everyone's best interests to know what the chessboard is, and where the pieces are, so you can make the best move, per se.
Okay, nice. So that's interesting. So another value add for recruiters, it's not just placing the roles, like how you win the business, how you be the most helpful is by offering
Yeah,
this advice better than the competition.
exactly. Yeah,
Great.
yeah.
So problem 5 was collecting details from the skilled work visas. So this is more talking about, I guess, they've selected who they want. I guess you've done like pre-checks to some extent where you can, that do they fit the criteria. But then there's collecting the paperwork. And you mentioned earlier, is it Passportia that you're outsourcing to?
Correct. Yeah.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
So they will manage it. But do you have an experience in this, like, and I guess in Canada as well, maybe talking about that, like, are there ever any challenges in getting them to submit details from the employee side of things and collecting details to make sure they get placed,
Yeah.
or what are the hurdles there?
Yeah, it's kind of you got to chase everyone up 24/7. If another recruiter is watching this, they would know as good as me that when you're trying to get that contract, the amount of cold calls and cold emails you got to give, man, like, it's actually sad. You're just in a room, just the phone's 24/7. It's depressing. It's the same with candidates, though. Someone's got work, someone's dog died, they got to go somewhere, this, that, someone just forgets, someone's sleeping when you call them at 9 a.m. Stuff like that. You just got to chase up everyone. You
I
really
think I
do.
think I think that advice is or like that experience share is really nice as well, because like, hey, you want to be paid. The people that hire you want to be paid, and you don't get paid, I guess, until like they're actually placed. But like, if they're an in-house recruiter trying to fill these roles as well, I think that's also like another consideration to maybe go for a recruitment company. And to give some honest background of me, I always, for the first 5 years of my professional working career, did not see any benefit in recruiters. I was like, they charge so much money, they do. But I think like just being honest, like, and I'm sure they've experienced it themselves, like trying to collect paperwork, it's probably a ball ache, you know? So if you weigh that up against the time it takes for them to do this, like there is like some real benefits of going with an external recruitment agency. And also I think this probably gives other recruiters a bit of comfort to know they're not the only ones. How much,
Totally.
like it's a percentage, and obviously it won't be super accurate, but like roughly, does your time go on just like collecting paperwork, that admin side of things?
Probably, we have some good systems in place, but sometimes you just got to kind of, oversee what's going on. I would say 10-15%, which is still significant in the grand scheme of things.
Dude, that's huge. I mean, if
That's
you're
huge,
making
isn't
10
it? Yeah.
positions, that's like potentially another role that you could be filling
Yep.
and a lot of
You got to
money on the
check their
table.
documents, right to work, etc., etc. And then also you got to organize it in a good way so you don't lose anything.
Mm.
And then there are any kind of other qualifications that they need, etc., etc. And I was just going to say, touching on what you said just before this, you're right. I think the most, when I did recruitment in Canada, it's very like, okay, we need this many employees, get them to me fast. Tomorrow we need that many, so lay off like 20 people, and then we need them back on the following day.
Yeah.
In the UK, I found that's a lot more advice focused. Like, okay, you're overstaffed here, or you're kind of not performing as well, in this kind of sector. I've worked I've worked in a warehouse too, so I kind of see these things, right? So especially not to mention the legislation and stuff. There is a bunch of legislation. Like when I was reading up on everything that I needed to know for UK based recruitment, mate, like I had like 6 Red Bulls and like 9 coffees. It was crazy. It's so boring as well, terms and oh god, but yeah, we got through it. So
But he gets the job done. Ali
we
gets
got
the
the job
job
done.
done.
Yeah, exactly that.
It's that sort of stuff that, like, if they're recruiting for the first time internationally, that's the sort of advice that's good to share, Ali. So it's like, yeah, help them set expectations.
100%.
Problem 5, and again, you touched upon this earlier, so it's been great. This is really good flowing. Problem 6, sorry, helping new hires with like relocation adjustments. So again, like you're an in-house recruiter, you've managed to plug the roles, but then it's like, oh dear, like I've got to find places for them to house, do all of this. Not all recruitment agencies are like yours in any way where they can help with that sort of service. But what are kind of like the obstacles there? Like how I imagine that probably takes longer than 10% of someone's role, right? So if they're doing this in-house, they've hired someone, and sure, let's say the paperwork takes them 10%, 15% of their time. They've then got another like probably 10, maybe more percent of time if they haven't got the infrastructure set up to place these people.
Yeah.
So maybe you could give some advice or experience there of, do they need like accommodation sorted before they start hiring for this role? Do they sort it out afterwards? Like, yeah, let's unpack that a bit.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, you got to put yourself into, because me moving 4 countries, I understand that really well. You don't want to move somewhere where, let's say, for example, in Canada, the the biggest demographic, at least in Brampton, Mississauga, is going to be Indian students, right? And they need to fund their studies, etc., etc. Now, if you take rupees, I think Indians rupees, isn't it? If you take rupees and convert it into dollars, you're not getting much. So you want some sort of security, right? Now, depending on the size of the order, I mentioned this is all conditional on the size of the order, right? If we can afford, if it's commercially effective for us. What we can do, we can lease out a spot and we can give, 1 month you don't have to pay anything, and then after that you'll slowly kind of start making payments. I think it was, I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head. I think it's like 35% rent first month, then it becomes 65, and then it's like 90, then it's 100. So you have kind of a break-in period where you kind of get to grips with the culture, any culture shocks you have, anything like that, and some income in your pocket as well for whatever you need. Maybe you need to get a driver's license. Maybe you need clothes. I don't know, like house stuff, etc.
Dude, that's so interesting. So the like again, any in-house recruiters that are going through this role as well, like just like the staggering of rent, helping them adjust to culture is just great for them as a company to be like, we understand you, international talent. It's this is what we're going to do to help you ease your process into it, and especially if you're students as well coming over for like a job and things like that. That's an awesome kind of angle to approach. Ali, we are on the last question. Congratulations. You've
Thank
made
you.
it so far. And this question actually came from Nigel Clerk, who is, he actually
Oh,
works for
Nigel.
Passportia. Yes,
Nigel.
we do like Nigel.
Fantastic guy, by the way. Fantastic guy.
But he is a good guy. We actually have kind of already answered the question. He'll be glad to know. But like, how do you? I'll ask you again in case you want to expand on it. Like, staying up to date with legal rules. So you mentioned the RAC earlier. Now, when I hear the RAC, I think of breakdown cover, right? So maybe talk more. Like, what does
Oh,
that
yeah, I
stand for
completely
as well?
forgot about those guys.
Yeah, yeah. So for someone that doesn't know what the REC is,
The
like
RAC.
maybe expand on kind of what they do, how they do it, and then maybe let's be a bit more specific here, based on your experience. Not maybe all recruiters, but say manufacturing recruiters. Like, are there any particular groups of clients that you service that you'd recommend that are good, like publications to keep up to date with?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. You got to remember, in terms of, there's two ways of doing it. You could either just stare at the government website, wait for an update to come up and read it yourself. But the most efficient way of doing is, joining things like the REC. Now, there's a lot of I don't know what
Which
the
is, sorry, the REC is
the REC is
recruitment.
the Recruitment Employment Confederation. Yeah,
Okay.
um, but yeah, like it's just a. So I went to their office yesterday when we were meant to do this yesterday, but
It's
I
up at the
left.
top. I get
Yeah.
it, Ali. Don't worry about it.
So we went to their office and I saw their office. Big team, big team. They've got a bunch of legal guys on the left, and they've got a bunch of other guys. I met what was it? Sayed Murtaza, if I'm not mistaken, that was his name. He was the product developer, and he was saying, "So, what kind of products would you want to see from us?" And I said, "Like, look, my story is I came from Canada, and just knowing, for example, where to, like a checklist of what to do. Step one is this, register on this, do that, do this." Would be kind of useful. And he said, "You know what? That's a fantastic idea. I'm going to try work on that." And he just passed on to some other people, and boom, 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 and now they're trying to, working on it. So I think joining organizations like those. There was another one I can't remember, but there are a lot of organizations that help recruiters and arm them with the, necessary compliance clauses and stuff that you need to know. That would be the most easy way. It's not too cheap, but it's not too expensive as well. It's definitely worth an investment. Definitely.
Okay, for sure. Yeah, I always prefer learning from others than trying to do the research myself. So
Right? Yeah, me too. Me too.
because I honestly don't trust my ability to read the government website, and because like you said, not only does it take years for it to update, but it's just words and words. Like at least when you speak to someone, they can give you right. Actually,
Yeah.
there's 100 points here, but these are the 3 points that actually matter to
Yeah.
like what your role is.
Yeah. It's a lot more engaging. You're more awake, to the conversation. When you're just reading and reading, it reminds me of uni. I hate uni.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we get that's another topic, right? Ali, you made it
Damn.
fantastic. The last thing I'll ask you is, do
Yeah.
you have a question for our next guest? And please bear in mind, they could work for the government in like legal. They could be another recruiter, or they could be, just literally processing the in-house like admin visa process at like a care home or something. So anything to do with mobility. So do you have anything you wanna post to them for me to ask?
Anything to do with mobility. Should I get a Honda bike or a Yamaha?
All right, okay. In global employee mobility, we should add.
Okay, I need to give that a bit more thought. I don't know. It depends on what they do, isn't it? Like a generic question in terms of global mobility would be, which country do you think has the least red tape? That would be
Oh, okay. I
mate.
will.
Let's tell you, UK has so much red tape. Not to have any problem with regulations, but mate, it just takes time up.
So that's a great question. Maybe if we get someone from the government or the immigration office to kind of answer that, that'd be awesome. Because obviously, the more we can reduce the friction there in an ethical way, of course.
Yeah,
That obviously would help the
beats and
mobility
stuff.
cause
Yeah,
as a
100%,
whole.
100%.
Ali, thank you so much for joining.
Sam, thank you very much for having me.